Welcome, warriors, and enjoy listening to this, the greatest podcast in the Empire, where we tell you all about the hearts and minds of what makes you who you are. Joining us, we have our leader, who looks for any reason to punch a Klingon, and he'll punch him even if he doesn't have a reason. It's Ben McLean.
And I'll kick Wookiees, too.
Now, also joining us, acclaimed scribe and author. Say what you will about him, post all you want, but do not get between him and the blood wine. It's Brandon Kirby.
I'm really more of a Ferengi.
Our technical guru. Klingon warriors fear him and refer to him as the blue screen of death. It's Chris McGee.
And don't you forget it.
And joining us as a special guest host, she wrote the book on the Klingon language, and when there wasn't enough profanity in it, she wrote a second book. It's Ash, daughter of Hume.
One can never have enough profanity.
And I am... I am killing my throat there. Folks, I am Phil Allen, a.k.a. the guy in the red shirt, and this is Trekosophy. And...
Klingons in red shirt.
Yeah, well, Klingons in the red shirt.
Stovacor. We already had the Stovacor episode.
Of course, the only reason Klingon shirts are red is all the humans they've ended up killing, which makes me wonder, can't we all just get along?
Okay.
Oh, we've lost him. Oh, no.
Oh, so you've got an L in your name.
Yeah, it's like Sherlock Holmes has a silent L in his name.
Okay. So no relation to the Humes of philosophical fame.
No, but I do have an Uncle David.
Oh, wow.
You have an Uncle David Hume?
Hume.
Ash, why don't you...
Introduce yourself.
2 feet into the flames, Grey Thor. Yeah, what? Tell us a little bit about yourself. You're the newest host. The people want to know.
People want to know about... What do people want to know about me?
Everything.
Everything.
We could be...
Yeah, from your birthday until today. Major events. Well, What sort of philosophers do you like to read? What sort of Star Trek really piques your interest? What episodes really catch you?
I love my Deep Space Nine.
Oh, okay, that's Ben's favorite.
I could tell you just about everything about Deep Space Nine and not much about anything else. No, not really. What can I tell you? I'm from New Zealand. I live in almost the very south part of New Zealand.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise known as the real Deep South.
The real deep? Yeah, it's about as deep as it gets.
And I write fiction. I have never actually studied... Yes, I do. I write science fiction and fantasy.
For profit? Or as a hobby?
For profit.
Hopefully
for profit.
Oh, okay.
Well, you do like to read. Tell us a little bit. Who's your favorite thinker? You said you like to read it. Who's your favorite?
Ooh.
Or maybe your favorite genre.
Favorite genre. Well, favorite philosophers. I'm going to be kind of weird here. I like Aristotle for being so contrary.
Good choice. I'm reading some of his metaphysics right now. I love Aristotle.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's a good... go ahead.
Contrary to what?
Oh, contrary.
Contrary to his teacher, for one.
True. He has an interesting take on... He talks about the potential of mankind, but he has a rather bizarre attitude towards slaves and their, I guess, potential, or shall we say lack thereof.
That's true. And I think maybe Aristotle might be a really good starting point for the episode. His central ethic, and Ash, maybe you and I would agree, lack thereof with some of his ethics. But to his central, what he's known for with his ethics is the concept of moderation, and that's got nothing to do with Klingons. They're completely opposed to the concept of moderation. And I have to put my cards on the table. I am more Klingon in that respect. I don't think Aristotle was right with moderation. Klingons were very much about having some sort of a desire and going out and getting it. And maybe that might be, that might be a useful starting point for us.
Klingons never do anything small, do they?
No, they don't. I don't know if you know this, Ash, but I wrote a book on Faith in the Final Frontier. It was about religion and religious philosophy in Star Trek. And I contrasted the Klingons with the Vulcans, how the Vulcans were very much about subduing their passions and their desires, and Klingons were very much about attaining them.
Yes.
So
I think Aristotle would have liked the Vulcans.
I suspect you're right about that. And the Vulcans sort of saw they were specious. They saw other species as a bit lesser than them. It might have fit in well with Aristotle's slave
they were
mentality.
definitely elitists.
Yeah.
The very definition of elitist.
And Aristotle's the father of logic. They, I wish I could rewrite the book now with the Aristotelian connection in mind.
I remember you're supposed to do a 2.0 of that book.
Well, maybe. We'll see.
We've already given you a bunch of different things to add to it.
Yeah.
Ben, you're awfully quiet.
Well, haven't had much to say yet. I'm more closer to thinking Aristotle is closer to being right than Plato on a lot of things.
Sure.
But I am more of a Platonist, though, because I like the kinds of questions Plato asks and his methods and his style. Aristotle's style is boring and difficult to read.
Yeah, it puts me to sleep when I try to read it.
Boring? Well, he's logical.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is taking us off, though. Yeah, the Klingons would agree with you. They're not linear people. They're not moderate people, and they're not linear thinkers. They tell stories. They sing songs. They don't communicate their ethics through if A then B, A therefore B. They communicate their ethics through a story, something that excites the passions. And it's very much a non-rational way of communicating. And that's the first question. It's a question I wrote down on the Google Drive, and it's one that I really want to discuss with you guys. And it's the concept of criteria for belief. And Ash, being the expert on Deep Space Nine, might be able to correct me if I'm wandering away from the story here. But I'm thinking back to when Miles and Julian were discussing the legend of Davy Crockett.
Yeah.
And they're talking about whether or not the legend literally happened, the legendary account of his death. And they were debating the facts of it. And then Worf chimes in and says, "You're both wrong. The only question that really matters is, do you believe in Davy Crockett? Because if you should, there should be no doubt in your mind that he died according to the legend, and that he died a hero's death. If you do not believe in the legend of Davy Crockett, then it doesn't matter how he died." But his criteria for belief was cultivation of the self, i.e., our pursuit of desires, our own desires. And to be fair, desiring something worthy of being desired, but how does it cultivate the self? If it adequately cultivates the self, we should believe in it. Is that a valid criteria for belief? Feel free to weigh in.
Well,
I think so.
No, not in cases where we have clear contrary evidence or clear contrary philosophical arguments or what have you. But when it's in a case of, our methods are, our other methods, our rational methods are inconclusive, or at least don't provide an objective justification, and we're in a situation where we have to go by something, then that's okay. And I think that's where they were with the Davy Crockett thing. They'd argued it back and forth, and they weren't getting anywhere. And so Worf comes in with that as, you get an answer that way, and it's a better one than not having one.
Okay, well, let me take it a step further. Let's up the ante a little bit here. Let's talk about when Jadzia was going for initiation into the House of Martok, and she had to go over the history of Sorella's, that was her soon-to-be mother-in-law's, a female genealogy. And Sorella had an account that claimed she was of descent from royalty. And Jadzia did some historical research and found some contrary evidence to that. And Sorella still wanted to believe that she was of royal descent. She had royal blood. Because that helped her in cultivation of the self. Not just desiring anything like a Ferengi would and going out and pursuing whatever you happen to desire, but desiring something worthy of being desired. It helped her get by in life. It helped her pursue noble goals, to believe that she was herself nobility. Now,
I think it just reinforced her vanity.
Possibly, but is that a justifiable criteria in that case? I'll turn it over to you all.
Well, I think not. I think it's just propping up her vanity. And what Jadzia was trying to do was knock her down a few pegs, and I think Jadzia had a point.
Ash, you were about to say something.
Jadzia had a point. In terms of, I think they're approaching the same problem from, I think, two different angles. The point of what matters about Sorella's lineage, the historical truth of it, or what she wants to see, and I look back on things like that as roughly, I guess, analogous to when the Greeks and Romans, the noble families who wanted to believe themselves descended from gods, whether they actually literally believed in gods or not, and the way that the belief in the gods and the belief in that you were descended from nobility, I guess, gave you justification for your position or something along those lines. And I guess in a way it depends, as far as the literal interpretation of history or the stories of history, to which do we give a greater weight? I mean, stories, even though they're not literally true, certainly have value and can teach us many things.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this has any bearing on it, but you're talking about what you believe in as giving you, how did you put it, a justification for what you do?
Yeah, so
the way I'm thinking about it, and I hate to bring, we've had so many episodes recently about religion. I hate to bring that back again, but so I won't go deeply into it. But I think about it this way, most Christians are, when they choose to become Christians, those that do choose, they do so, and they take on the Christian lifestyle, which is a very what's the word I'm looking for?
So sort of a moral lifestyle?
Right. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for, or at least one of them. A very moral lifestyle, morally rich lifestyle. That's their excuse for for living that lifestyle. There's nothing wrong with that, but there are plenty of agnostics and atheists who also live that sort of lifestyle. Hey, whatever gives you that lifestyle, there's nothing wrong with either one, and I think that sort of justification, any justification, is fine. Not sure if that makes much sense.
Well, now you know why I wasn't speaking up, because I was trying to avoid this turning into yet another episode on religion.
Don't know how you can discuss philosophy without discussing religion at some
They
point.
are
Maybe.
pretty closely related, aren't they?
Well, I mean, you can certainly have a discussion on metaphysics or epistemology without bringing in religion specifically.
No.
And you can at least have some discussions about modern ethics without bringing in religion. But it does come up a lot.
Well, let's talk about love, because I think the term Ash used was justification of our behavior, or justification of our position. I think that the way the Klingons went about it was overboard. You can't use cultivation of the self to justify truth propositions. If religion's what we're discussing, they're saying, oh, we killed the gods, they're more trouble than they're worth. That doesn't actually answer the question of whether or not God exists, or gods exist. But what about something like love? Whereby I could tell myself certain things about my lifestyle, about sin, about love, and by virtue of me telling myself those things, they become true. I mean, for example, is a life worth living with Rachel, my wife? Would I be happy? Well, if I tell myself it is, and actually treat her as though it is, all of a sudden that becomes true. If I tell myself that it's not and I treat her that way, then it becomes untrue.
Oh, right. Yeah, there are situations in which whether you actually have a belief or not can have a future effect on whether the belief is true or not. And the example of this that was used in the epistemology course I took was the optimistic pitcher, the optimistic batter. That's it. The optimistic batter. If the batter in a baseball game believes that they can hit the ball, then they are much more likely to actually hit the ball. But if they believe, in psychology, this is talked about under the heading of cognitive psychology, that beliefs that you have can, in certain contexts, actually change how successful you are at your endeavors. And there are some limited ways in which, actually believing something can make it true.
Oh yeah, so to take it back to the Klingons, if they believe that they will win the battle, then there's a greater chance that they will behave in such a way that will make it more likely for them to win.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if I believe I'm going to successfully go pick up when I go to the bar tonight, I'm much more likely to actually go pick up, as opposed to standing off in the corner being miserable the whole time.
That's why they always say to each other, "Kapla!"
Success, yeah.
Yeah, but on the other hand, the danger with that is megalomania, where you become so confident in your own abilities, foolishly confident, that you abandon all strategy, and you can end up losing from that. if you don't keep it in balance. That's another reason why we come back to saying I think Aristotle had a real point that virtue is always to be found away from either extreme. There are usually two opposite vices, and virtue, whatever it is, will lie between them.
You see,
and in this case, there's the vice of believing you can't succeed, and then therefore you don't, and the vice of believing you can succeed in a total disconnect from reality, and therefore sending your soldiers to fight in a battle that it makes no sense to fight because there's no real way of winning. And this comes into our real life politics right now. I've got a friend who's a libertarian, and he's trying to get everyone to vote libertarian. I'm not a libertarian, but even on the assumption that all the libertarian beliefs are true, we have a plurality voting system, and a plurality voting system is designed for two parties. Third parties
then
generally
50%
don't have
of
a
people here
realistic
don't share
chance of
the
winning.
political landscape that you're talking about.
Well,
a lot of countries though do have a bipartisan arrangement to them.
Yeah, we have in the United States two parties, Republican and Democrat. Those are the two
That
major
sucks
parties.
for you guys.
And we have a voting system. Yeah, it does. And we have a voting system that is you get only one vote and it's winner take all. And we have two basic philosophies. But what this does is if people with a more anti-government, anti-authoritarian philosophy have two candidates, and people with a more expansionist government philosophy have one candidate, then the vote gets split for the anti-government, and the pro-government candidate gets in. Or vice versa.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and this raises questions of pragmatism and idealism, but I think it deviates from Klingon philosophy.
Well, what I'm saying is that you can commit yourself to a fight or a cause and believe you're going to win, and say, curse you, coward, to anyone who disagrees with the possibility that you could, anyone who disagrees that you're going to win and points out, the reality that you're going, that there's no way.
Yeah. So you could take,
and you can actually work against your own goals.
So you could take it back to, for example, in the episode Blood Oath, where I think it was Kang was absolutely so convinced that he wasn't going to succeed, that in his mission, that he treated it like a suicide mission, and the other Klingons were treating it like a suicide mission until Dax finally stepped up and said, "Hang on, guys, you can win this.
Yeah,
if we just think like people who are trying to win."
Yeah.
You can actually go in and you can actually get your vengeance.
Yeah, and that's great when there is a real possibility of winning. But when there isn't, it might actually make, there are real physical facts out there.
Yeah, so like when Napoleon tried to invade Russia.
Wasn't going to happen.
Right, and when Hitler tried to invade Russia.
And Hitler tried to invade Russia too, yeah.
Still wasn't going to happen. Nobody can survive the cold.
And I mean,
only Canada successfully stands up to Russia. They tried to take the North Pole. We said, ain't going to happen today, boys.
Yeah. Mounting an expedition to the pole, eh?
Well, God save the Queen. But that was the point that I wanted to bring up. It was the whole concept of the demarcation of desire and its impact on our discovery of truth, because I think our own desires serve as a means of exploring truth, but only in certain areas. And I think a lot of those are behavioral areas, such as love, such as sin. But in terms of metaphysical truth, I don't think so. I think it does have an enormous impact. That's why you can have the movie 300. People were naive enough to think they could actually win that fight, and as a result, it went a long ways. I was naive enough to think that Rachel would actually say yes when I asked her to marry me, even though we weren't dating, and that had an influence on whether or not she would say yes. My desiring for a political, Ben, like what you were talking about, a political policy to work doesn't actually make it work. My desiring a business venture to work might not actually make it work.
Yeah, I was talking about the futility of a third-party candidate in a two-party system when you have a voting system that reinforces the two-party system.
Well, let's talk about that, though. Let's talk about actually going out and hammering out a future for yourself, a destiny. Kalis fought off an army. You guys might know the stories better than I. What's the dominant party in Britain? Well, actually, I guess it's David Cameron and the Tories, but part of that was the Labour Party. They started out as a third party in a two-party system, and they became the dominant party. Nobody told them that. They didn't listen to all the critics who said, oh, you're wasting your vote. They went out and they kept campaigning, and then they won the majority.
Hasn't England adopted something a little other than or a little more complicated than plurality voting, though?
No, well, it's similar to Canada's system. They've sort of got three parties, the Liberal Democrats, the Labour, and the Tories. But with Klingons, that's the whole point. You can tell yourself a story that maybe it sounds absurd, maybe it's against evidential reasoning, and you can actually believe in it. And I wanted to make another point. It was the point about sedate living. How it's not Klingon. And it's nowhere near to my philosophy. Klingons are the type of people that they will go balls to the wall for a night of celebration. Blood wine, you name it. They have a great time at parties.
They do, they drink with their enemies.
Well, exactly. You have the followers of Galron drinking with the followers of Duras, and nobody cares. Who's counting whose soldiers on what side? We want to have a good time. Why women in song? And I think
we might kill each other tomorrow. Let's drink.
Yeah, let's have a great time because we're Klingons. I think that's a wonderful way to live your life. And to live your life is a sedate Aristotelian. Ash, I'm sorry, I love Aristotle as much as the next guy. I really do.
Well, on that count, I don't entirely agree with him, so...
Okay, so I'm not being terribly offensive. I'm only offending Ben, and that actually delights me, so I'll continue.
What? I didn't get it. What?
I'm talking about Klingon philosophy. Adopting it is something opposed to sedate living.
And sedate living means...
It's like G.K. Chesterton praising Joan of Arc over and above...
Living like a Vulcan.
Yeah, living like a Vulcan, exactly.
Oh.
Let me get out the quotation. I've quoted it before. I want to quote it again, because we're talking about Klingon philosophy, and it drives home my point that I'm making now, even if I've said it before. It's contrasting Klingon philosophy with Vulcan philosophy. What did I do here? Oh. Here it is. I know I've quoted this once before. It was actually, I quoted the first episode I was ever on when we were discussing Vulcan philosophy, but now we're discussing Klingon philosophy, so it's just as applicable. It's about whether or not we should prefer Vulcan ideals versus Klingon ideals. I said, we should prefer logic in questions of truth, because truth isn't necessarily what we desire it to be. The criticism of Vulcans is that they only have sex once every 7 years. The criticism of Klingons is that they only have critical thoughts once every 7 years. Anyone can appreciate either way of life. The only thing I could never appreciate would be a culture that asks us to think with our heart and feel with our mind. That would be the inversion of everything beautiful and true. Going to a banquet only to find systematic and rigorous rules about whether or not it's moral to wear a hat at the table or which fork to use strikes me as the opposite of everything a banquet should be, a passionate and joyful celebration. Vulcans never touch their food, but Klingons never touch their utensils. Conversely, to believe in something because of some sensationalism, rhetoric, a desire for a thing to be so, or perhaps a comedian told a joke about people who believe things contrary to him. These are the opposites of logic, our path to truth. A culture that promotes sensationalism in philosophy or politics but systematic rules at banquets has it backwards. We should be systematic when we think about religion and politics and philosophy, but sensational at banquets. Otherwise, we Vulcanize that which is Klingon and Klingonize that which is Vulcan. And I think, with that quotation in mind, I have a deep respect and admiration for Klingon philosophy is something that helps me pursue joy. Put all my cards on the table. Go ahead. Flame away.
Well, Brandon, I've read your book, and you said you didn't like Aristotle, but you seem to be very Aristotelian in some ways. Although a Christian Aquinian or Thomistic kind of Aristotelian, because you have two extremes. You have the extreme of being all Vulcan and the extreme of being all Klingon, and you don't want either of those. But then you do say, though, that there's more than one way to be in the middle, and one way of being in the middle where you try to blur the two together was bad.
Right.
And another way of being in the middle where you have both of them as much as possible is good.
Right, exactly.
I'm not sure. You make an analogy with colors, but I'm not sure where the analogy actually points. You know, there's the analogy, but I'm not really able to connect it or make it practical. So I never quite got what you're saying on that part in your book. But the fact is, though, that you do have two opposite vices, and you have a thing that is neither one, that is between them. Although, you have more of a circle than a spectrum. Like Aristotle is a spectrum. What you've got is more like a circle. But what's actually at the top of the circle, I'm not quite clear on.
Well, okay, let's talk about that. Yeah, I'm Aristotelian Thomistic when it comes to raising questions of truth. Gotta be Vulcan, gotta be illogical. You need reason, you need observation. But there's this whole other sphere. Wine, women, and song. I say wine, women, and song. Ash, I don't know your orientation. Whatever works for you, put in whatever term you like.
I like song.
The song, okay. We'll go with song. I like song too. So yeah, there's a Thomistic part of me that loves logic. But there's also this Kierkegaardian part of me that not so much. The thing I really don't like is I was having a conversation the other day with, I'll say this as a Protestant, people who were painfully Protestant. I'm a black man using the N-word at this point. These people were painfully Protestant in that they were being very critical of linear thought. And their method of arriving at truth was whatever they felt like was true to them. And they would get mad at you if you didn't believe the same thing that they believed, even though their only method for arriving at it was how they felt. And conversely, they led sedate lives. There was no passion there. There was no dance parties. And that just struck me as not a way I want to live, and it struck me as not a way of how I want to arrive at truth. So maybe, I don't know if that offered any clarity or if it offered, I don't know what that did, but it was my response to what you said.
Okay. Well,
maybe if you had a formal question.
Yeah, well, what does it really mean to have both of the things alongside each other, like you say in your book? And how is that different from combining the two? Which you say in your book that combining the two is bad. Or at least you seem to say
blending them together, yes.
What?
Yeah, blending them together I think is bad.
Yeah, and what's the difference between having both and blending them together when it gets practical? Because, I mean, that makes sense if you're painting, but how that actually applies to the life of passion versus the life of reason that we're talking about here, I'm not clear on.
Well, I don't know how to respond to that without repeating myself.
You two have lost me already.
Oh, bummer. Ash, maybe before we conclude, you said you had lots of notes on Klingon philosophy. Maybe if you wanted to share with us one of the notes you took, or maybe all of them.
I did. Well, I made quite a few notes, and sort of, because it's a big subject, isn't it? I guess most of it was just sort of structuring it for myself. You know, what is Klingon philosophy exactly?
We'll shed some of that structure on the rest of us. Shed some light on that for us all.
Yes, please wake me back up.
Well, I don't
Chris,
know
you can grab some bourbon. That'll do the same trick.
I thought alcohol was supposed to send you to sleep, but okay. You'll either wake up or you pass out, one or the other. Yeah, so I sort of thought of it as a cultural idea. Klingon philosophy, you've got the religious side, you've got the moral side, and you've got the sort of the social philosophical side, and the sense of what are their attitudes to each of those things. So, for example, Kirk thinks of a lot of the Klingon ideals as, I guess, evil in a sense. And he has quite an antipathetic attitude to what the Klingons, I guess, their culture and their attitude. And for example, in the arena, what's that one where the good fights against evil, and the Excalbians and the what's that called?
Excalibur.
Can't remember.
Don't recall the name of the episode. It's the Abraham Lincoln episode. We'll leave it at that.
One. So you've got
Savage Curtain.
Arena. I think it was Arena.
No, that was
the Savage Curtain.
Savage Curtain. That's the one.
Savage Curtain. Yeah. Okay.
So you've got good fighting against evil, and I'm not sure, did the Klingons have a concept of good and evil? You know, what makes Kalis evil, and indeed what makes, for example, Genghis Khan evil? I'm sure he was a good guy to a lot of the Mongols.
Yeah, I'm sure some people. I think there's a very Nietzschean quality to the Klingons.
Well, they killed their gods.
God is dead, is he? Yeah. You can't get any more Nietzschean than that. And the fact that they were more interested in desire than the intellect screams of Nietzsche. I'm sure a Nietzschean scholar would be upset at me for saying so. But Nietzsche's really trying to go beyond good and evil.
Yeah.
I've heard it said that Nietzsche's not just Hitler's favorite philosopher, he's hell's favorite philosopher too. And though Nietzsche would have no endorsement of Hitler, I'm sure the fact that he's trying to ask us to forget ethical questions.
Mm.
Makes me think, if you're an ethicist, Nietzsche has to be placed on the category of evil. If you're an ethicist.
Well,
I mean, a desire for Germany to return to the warrior aristocracy,
yeah.
or his admiration of Old Testament heroes. The thing that makes us as Christian or post-Christian members of society uncomfortable about the Old Testament are the things that excited Nietzsche.
Yeah, I guess, can you be an ethicist without sort of viewing things like good and evil as a dichotomy? Because Klingons definitely do have their ethics. It's just very different from, say, for example, Federation ethics or Dominion ethics or...
Well, I think what you say, Brandon,
Ben.
may be correct about Klingons in general in some way.